12 Angry Men. Also all the President's Men and a Few Good Men. Weird how many classic talking men movies there are. I thought men were always the ones who didn't want to talk. We did this play in high school, but since it was a mixed cast, they called it 12 Angry Jurors. And one girl in the cast was a conservative Christian who refused to say the phrase damning evidence because she thought it counted as swearing. I had fun playing Juror #3, the villain played by Lee J. Cobb in the film, but I'm not sure we lived up to the lofty standards of the source material. I remember watching the 50s version in history class, and it was great. TIL, there is a version other than the one from the 50s. Mostly all takes place in just one room as well, which makes it even more impressive how good of a movie it is. Back in my day, refusing to say a line for personal reasons was how you got on stage crew. Also Grumpy Old Men. Cause it was a play originally. We did a read of it in high school. I got to be Juror #8. He's the hero, but he also brings evidence into deliberations that wasn't introduced during the trial. First movie that came to mind. Damn good. Reservoir Dogs. Most of the movie takes place in one place, and the scenes are long, but it's very good. Just any Tarantino movie. Tarantino movies are all about the dialogue. Came here for this. Why do I have to be Mr. Pink? It's much like Mr. Pussy. A lot of QT's oeuvre are stage plays dressed up as movies. Hateful Eight comes to mind. Ingenious Bastards has got great action scenes, but the most tense ones IMO are the conversations at the dairy farm, the cafe, and the underground tavern. This guy says he don't leave tips. Tarantino should be top of the list for pretty much every movie he's written when it comes to good movies that are basically all dialogue. My favorite line is from Dusk Till Dawn. Crazy people do not explode when sunlight hits them. One of my favorite movies. The original reason there is so little of the heist is budgetary reasons. It just makes it such a better film. What a killer directorial debut for a filmmaker. I'd say Kevin Smith is up there as well, but I can understand the flavor not quite tasting right for everyone with him. Suchibuchis. Before Sunrise. I was going to say the Before series. All three are great examples of dialogue-heavy films. Came here to say this. All three are dialogue-heavy, but the dialogue is fantastic, totally realistic and believable, and yet unpredictable. Before Sunset includes 11-minute-long Steadicam shot while they walk and talk. It's a great shot. Amazing trio of movies. Compared to the other movies and other responses, at least those that I've seen, this really is basically just dialogue. I was not enthusiastic about it before I saw it, but after seeing the first own, I was so happy to learn there was a second one, and thoroughly enjoyed it as well. One day I will find a way to watch the third one, too. Every other romantic movie just shows a couple rowing, picnicking, or walking, or whatever, with music in the montage. It has always bothered me why no dialogue. No surprise I adore the Before series. And lots of other Linklater films, like Slacker and Waking Life and the other two in this trilogy, of course. For Sunset, when she almost touches his hair. Even though the movie feels improvised, it is not, as Linklater states that improvising on set leads to poor quality. Instead, the actors were heavily involved in writing the dialogues. That's the best one of the three. 10 years since the last one, but we got no fourth movie. There's a reason they are all so highly rated on IMDb. Knew this was gonna be here, please, that it's the top comment. I mean, homie, there are ways on the high seas. It's also like $5 to rent on Amazon. Quote of his about slacker is a word, not the film, from a 1995 interview in Mondo 2000. I think the cheapest definition of a slacker would be someone who's just lazy, hanging out, doing nothing. I'd like to change that to somebody who's not doing what's expected of them. Somebody who's trying to live an interesting life, doing what they want to do, and if that takes time to find, so be it. I came here just to type this. The entire trilogy is gold. Also by the same director, Waking Life. Felt like Boyhood was an unofficial spin-off. Beat me to it, damn it. I think it's because Julie Delpy is kind of done with acting and considering going to medical school. I was disappointed that they didn't make another one. They were 9 years apart start to finish, but it would have been interesting to see their kids grow up and them be back to just loving/struggling together. Plugs. Made for 25 grand, it was one of the first movies to be awarded the nascent NC-17 rating while having a nudity and no violence, but for the dialogue. Quite the achievement. Off topic, sort of, but funny in the same way. Frank Zappa got his parental warning sticker for an album with no lyrics. Try not to suck any pit on your way through the parking lot. There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there? She'll get over ducking a dead guy. My mom's been ducking a dead guy for years. I call him Dad. You know there's a million fine-looking women in the world, but they don't all bring you lasagna at work. This job would be great if it weren't for all the ducking customers. 37? Hey, you're not allowed to rent here anymore. Whenever I think about that movie, I think about the conversation on whether or not it's ethical for a contractor to work on the Death Star. Strangely timeless topic, and kind of thought-provoking. I don't appreciate your ruse, ma'am. Rival. Sure there are aliens, but the movie is entirely about language and how it affects and changes us. One of my all-time favorite movies, if not my favorite drama. If you date it, I encourage you to read Ted Chiang's wonderful short stories, one of which was the source material for Arrival. Incredible movie, but it depends on how you define underrated. After all, it was nominated for 8 Oscars including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Denis Villeneuve will be regarded as one of the best modern directors in the future. Every single one of his films have been masterpieces. This movie is so good. Hugely underrated. Great story, great atmosphere with the continuously overcast skies, lingering questions and subsequent spreading paranoia. The casting was great, especially with Forest Whitaker, one of my favorites, having a central role alongside Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner. Plus, with the way the movie twists and ends up playing out, it's good to have a large amount of dialogue so as to drop hints and exposition between the lines. The story of your life was so touching. Ted Chiang digs really deep on some high-level academic topics, and the sci-fi is top-notch. One of my favorite books, hands down. It has a perfect score too. That Max Richter's song is stunning. That movie moves something in me on a foundational level. I am not a big Amy Adams fan, but that movie just, I don't know, moves me. I came here to say this as well. He's one of my favorite directors. If you haven't seen Incendies 2010, please do. And go in blind. The storytelling. I mean, it's a good thing such storytelling tropes are rare, because they are difficult to pull off and absolute head trips if done right. If they were common, there would be so many ham-fisted screw-ups and the trope wouldn't be rewarding. Man from Earth. Holy stick. I'm always the crazy guy that brings this movie up in favorites lists, and no one ever knows what I'm talking about. Man from Earth is amazing. This is the movie I thought of when I read the title. I came here for this movie. This, Wristcutters, A Love Story, and Mr. Nobody are my top 3 obscure movies. The whole movie is just a group of people sitting in a living room having a conversation, and yet it's still one of the best movies I've ever seen. This is the answer. Short of like a radio play or fiction podcast, this is the dialogue-based movie. Beat me to it. Commented before I scrolled. Glad this wasn't buried and others know of its greatness. Such an amazing film. Just don't watch the sequel. Forget I said anything about the sequel. There is no sequel. Literally same here. I'm glad to see folks who have seen it. Plays like a good campfire story. This is the first movie that came to mind for me for this spread. I didn't know what I was getting into when I watched it, but I loved it. Smiling. Blankberry Glen Ross. What's my name? Duckview. That's my name. Third prize is you're fired. Second prize. Set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired. Coffee is for closers. Jack Lemmon is incredible in this. He does so much in some scenes, playing confident, pathetic, persuasive, terrified, sometimes all at once. In a film of insanely good performances, Lemmon is the secret MVP. Before this movie, I didn't even know he knew the duck word. Always be closing. You call yourself a salesman, you son of a glitch? I'm from downtown. I'm from Mitch and Murray. And I'm here on a mission of mercy. Character of Gil on The Simpsons, the nebbish, desperate loser usually in a sales job, is based on Jack Lemmon's character in this. I only saw this about 5 years ago, and my biggest takeaway was how much Jack Lemmon's character reminded me of Walter White. I realize, of course, his character came well before, of course, but the cadence was very similar. Didn't see this watch? The leads are weak. You're weak. Put the coffee down. The coffee is for closers only. R.I.P. Tony Sly. I remember seeing Boiler Room when it came out and being extremely impressed with Ben Affleck's monologue. And then I saw GGGR and realized that not only was Affleck's monologue a rip-off, but it was a not very good rip-off. The whole scene was not in the original play. It was written specifically for the movie, and it is fantastic. And your name is You're Wanting. What about fourth? Alec Baldwin was only in that movie for like 5 minutes, but it was the best part. The Hateful Eight. There's also some human being-shaped goobs of red liquid that occasionally burst. Man, I remember watching that thinking WTF, it's a Tarantino movie, where's the blood? Well, Kurt Russell's character did a thing. Personally, I liked it when the human water balloons exploded in Django Moore. 3 hours of Clue, the movie, and not once was I bored watching it the first time. Such an impressive movie, IMO. Everything takes place in one location. You have nothing but the characters to compel the story, and QT absolutely nailed it. Really, any movie by Tarantino? Favorite movie that year? It's honestly the Tarantino movie I rewatch the most these days. It's so well done, and you catch subtle little character details every time you watch it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a big renaissance on it in a couple of years. It's really impressive. You have to nail it shut. Correct. Kill Bill 2, Watty, Inglourious Bastards, Jackie Brown, and Pulp Fiction were all dialogue heavy. My dinner with Andre. Abed agrees. Abed was being weird, by which I meant he wasn't being weird. Interestingly enough, that tribute episode of Community was directed Richard Iodmos from the IT crowd who, in addition to being a hilariously awkward English comedian, is a huge film buff. This was my first thought when I saw the post. Great movie, and it makes me wish I was an eccentric involved in theater. Did not know Richard Iod directed that episode. Community fan here. Came looking for this comment. Loved the arcade game. Tell me more. Abed liked chicken fingers. Quentin Tarantino. Best answer. Without a doubt, one of my favorite items is My Dinner with Andre action figures. And what you can do, which is so cute, is you can reenact the whole scene. You know, where the two guys talk to each other and say, you know, boy, I'm sure glad you found a good restaurant. You know, it's so hard these days to get in. Who do you know? Oh, I just called. Made a call. Spur of the moment. Ha ha, oh, you can always get a reservation. You know. That's not from the movie, but you can make up your own dialogue, which is one of the great things about action figures.